Ensuring Safe and Secure Elections During COVID-19 webinar, part of the Naperville League of Women Voters Summer Election Series. I'm Melanie Greenberg from the National Council of Jewish Women. We're pleased to join forces with the DuPage County NAACP and the Naperville League of Women Voters for this important and informative series. We have over 180 registered attendees tonight. Just a few housekeeping notes. This webinar will be recorded. All attendees, other than the panelists, have their video and audio muted. Thank you for submitting your questions in advance. The National Council of Jewish Women, NCJW, is a grassroots organization of volunteers and advocates who don't need to be Jewish or women. We turn progressive ideas into action. Inspired by Jewish values, NCJW strives for social justice by safeguarding individual rights and freedoms. NCJW was founded right here in Chicago in 1893 during the Columbia Exposition to be a forum for women to discuss, argue, and solve the issues of the day. Some of these issues were immigration, civil rights, and a woman's right to control her body. It's been 127 years, and our mission has not changed much. Unfortunately, we're today. We do it through community service, advocacy, and education, with programs just like the one tonight. This program is of particular interest to me as the Illinois co-chair of NCJW's Promote the Vote, Protect the Vote campaign. We're working hard to ensure that every eligible voter is able to register to vote, to cast a ballot, and engage in all levels of government in a deep and meaningful way. I am now pleased to introduce Michael Childress, President of the DuPage County NAACP.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Michael Childress, and I have the pleasure and the awesome responsibility of serving as the president of the DuPage County NAACP. Our organization is the largest and the oldest civil rights organization in the world. The NAACP has over 2,200 branches and some 500,000 members worldwide. These members are from every race, creed, color, and gender across the globe. The NAACP stands for the National Association for the Advancement of Colored People, and we're in the final stages of being recognized as a non-governmental organization by the United Nations. The NAACP's historical records are housed at the Library of Congress, which has served as the organization's official repository since 1964. The NAACP will continue to fiercely demand equal and complete access to the ballot box in every community and every state. In closing, it is our hope that you get all your questions answered and then vote like your life depends on it. The struggle will continue, and now over to Jeff.
Jeff, you need to unmute yourself.
I have to unmute. Again, welcome to the League of Women Voters Summer Election Series. This is the first of 3 informational webinars to be hosted by the League. Our partners in tonight's programming are the National Council of Jewish Women and the National Association for the Advancement of Colored People. The first program is designed to inform registered voters of the possible complications and the proposed changes to the national elections this fall. Our organizations have always promoted the idea of open and free elections as a big part of democracy. Because of the current epidemic racing across our country, plans need to be made to modify the traditional voting process. This means everyone needs to be aware of those changes so that their vote can be counted this fall. tonight's webinar entitled Ensuring Safe and Secure Elections During COVID-19. I am Jeff Knesevich, Treasurer of the League of Women Voters of Naperville, and I will serve as tonight's moderator. The League of Women Voters encourages the informed and active participation of citizens in government and works to influence public policy through education and advocacy. Any citizen 18 years of age or older, male or female, may join this organization. The League of Women Voters is nonpartisan and neither supports nor opposes candidates for elected office, but does act on issues after member study and have a consensus. The League of Women Voters has a long-standing of advocacy for open elections and the abolishment of any restrictions that may restrain any registered voter from proper access to the election process and polling places. This has been a mainstay of the League since the suffrage movement, and the right for women to vote was granted on August 26, 1920. Tonight's format will include an opening statement by our speaker, followed by questions and answer period. The questions have been prepared by the League, the Council, and the NAACP, and by our audience. Our guest presenter is Mike Dietrich, who is the Public Information Officer with the Illinois State Board of Election. Before joining the board in January of 2018, Matt spent 3 decades in journalism as a newspaper reporter in New Jersey, New York, Wisconsin, and Illinois, where he served as the editorial page editor at the Illinois State Journal Register in Springfield through 2012. He was founding editor of the website Reboot Illinois, which covered Illinois state politics, and in 2017 worked for the Better Government Association and PolitiFact Illinois as a fact checker. Matt has a master's degree in journalism from the University of Illinois, Champaign-Urbana. Let's ask Mike to provide us with some background on the upcoming plans for the Illinois State Board of Elections regarding this fall's elections. Matt, welcome to the program.
Thank you, Jeff. I wanted to start just by giving a brief summary of what the Illinois State Board of Elections is and what we do and what we don't do. What we do is we administer elections, but we don't conduct the voting and we don't conduct voter registration. In Illinois, that is all done at the local level by our 108 local election authorities, which includes 102 county clerks and 6 municipal boards of election. We have various divisions with various specialized tasks. Our voting and registration system division does all the testing and certification for the voting systems that are used throughout Illinois. Right now, there are 6 systems that are certified for use. The VRS division helps the local election authorities in the statutorily required testing of all equipment that happens before elections. It oversees a 5% random retabulation after each election, and basically works with the local election authorities to make sure that their systems are running properly, tested properly. Our election operations division, it works with the local election authorities to assist them in the actual conduct of the election. And that is in terms of things like we go around the state and conduct judge training schools for election judges. Some counties and election authorities do that on their own. Some counties don't have the personnel to do that on their own, so we step in and help. The operations people also do the statewide canvass after every even year election, general and primary election in even numbered years. And then our board, we are governed by an 8-member board that is comprised of 4 Democrats and 4 Republicans. and they certify the vote after each election. And after the November 3rd election, that's going to happen on December 4th. That's the official certification. We also operate the online voter registration portal on our website. Now, what we are essentially is a hub. You can go online and you can register to vote, but what you're doing is giving us your information, which we then transmit to the local election authorities to complete the registration for their records. So, and our other main function concerns campaign finance and campaign disclosure. We have a campaign disclosure division that regulates the reporting of campaign finance in Illinois and make sure that all political committees are adhering to the Illinois campaign finance law. So that's in a nutshell, that's what we do. But it's really important that people understand that it's the local election authorities who actually set up the polling places. They have to recruit the judges who staff the polling places. They actually conduct the voting. They maintain the voter registration records that are used to create the poll books that when you go to your polling place or to your early voting site and you ask for a ballot, the poll books are what the poll workers check to make sure that you're in there. They hand you your ballot, you sign for it. That's what they check your signature against. That's all done locally. So the other thing that the State Board of Elections does is we maintain a statewide database of all registered voters. All states are required by the National Voter Registration Act to do that. So every night, all 108 local election authorities upload to us their latest voter registration data so that every day we have an up-to-date record of any changes, any new registrations, any voters who have been removed, have moved to other jurisdictions, moved out of state for whatever reason. But that's what we do. And we work in general, we just try to assist the local election authorities adhere to the election code. Right now, obviously, the biggest topic and the reason that we're here today is mainly to talk about what we're going, how is the COVID-19 going to affect the November 3rd election. And just today in the General Assembly, we had a bill introduced that is designed to address that issue on a variety of fronts. And so we can talk about that as things go along here. Lot to talk about. Illinois was, I have to say, we had our primary on March 17th. There were 4 states scheduled to do it that day. Ohio backed out the day before, decided to postpone theirs. Illinois, Arizona, and Florida went ahead. By the time March 17th came around, we already had over 900,000 votes that had been cast. But when you look at the trajectory of coronavirus and COVID-19 infections in Illinois, on March 17th, I think we had about 105 documented cases. On that date is the day that the first death from coronavirus, from COVID-19 was reported. So really, I think we came in just under the wire getting our primary election in that day. I think if it had been a week later, it would have been a whole different scenario, because the charts that Governor Pritzker shows daily at his press conferences that shows the growth in infections, really at March 17th, it's still level. It's March 18th, it starts to go up and it shoots way up, and it's kept on going. And at this point, we don't know what it's going to be, what the situation will be on November 3rd. We were aware back in March that the epidemiologists were talking about a possible resurgence in the fall, which would fall right at November 3rd, right at in that neighborhood. So we were, and all the election authorities, and of course all the lawmakers were well aware in early March that we could be facing, the crisis was only starting then. We're not 100% sure of exactly where we're at now. We absolutely don't know what the situation will be on November 3rd. So we're trying to do our best to make contingencies now to make things as safe as possible for all voters, to make sure that every voter, everyone who is a resident of Illinois who is of voting age, is able to exercise their right to vote safely. That's going to mean, as we'll see throughout this discussion, obviously we're going to push voting by mail, just as we did in the 10 days or so before the primary. We're really going to encourage people to take advantage of that. That's the one way of voting where you can avoid any contact with anyone. Short of that, we'll also be talking about things like early voting, which begins this year on September 24th. Early voting always begins 40 days ahead of an election in Illinois now. That's another way of allowing for in-person voting while also spreading out the traffic, avoiding bottlenecks on election day. However, one of the things that we also need to consider is that in Illinois, we are very voter friendly. We have enacted same-day registration where an unregistered voter can go into their polling place on election day, can register on election day and cast a ballot. We also have in our system, registration never really stops. You can register right up to and on election day. There are restrictions as far as online registration, but the ability to register to vote is not something that we want to infringe. We want to make sure that everyone is allowed to register and allowed to vote and that no one's left out. So all of this has gone into our thinking. It's gone into the lawmakers' thinking. Obviously, the local election authorities have been thinking about this a lot as well. And the federal government. We have roughly $16.8 million in the current budget that will be devoted to coronavirus efforts to make voting safe on election day and before. So this is something that everyone in the election community is very much aware of. So there's my introduction, and I think Jeff, if you want to start with questions now.
Yeah, I do, Matt. We have a few people that are already chimed in here. Thomas from Bolingbrook said you piqued his interest by saying that the election will be held on November 3rd, and it is federally mandated that it's the first Tuesday of the month in November. Is there any chance that date could be changed?
No, that date will not be changed.
Okay. From your discussion, you talked about what the board does. Where do you get your authority? Is it the state legislature? How are you
Yes.
mandated?
Our authority is outlined in the Illinois Election Code in statute. So we were established under the 1970 Constitution, and our essential functions are defined in the Election Code. And that's why when the issue came up back, in March, when coronavirus became a concern, there was talk early on. We were getting questions about will the Board of Elections postpone the primary election? And we explained to a lot of different people that we don't have the authority to do that. If the legislature wants to give us that authority, they could by rewriting the election code, but that's set in statute, and the only body that can change statute is the General Assembly. So we don't, as the Board of Elections, we don't have the authority to change an election date. That's set in statute. The governor doesn't have the authority to change an election date. That would have to be, now, like I said, if the General Assembly saw fit to do so, they could insert a clause into the election code that gives our board the authority to do that. We haven't seen that. That's not in the bill that's going to be under consideration this week here in Springfield.
the election board or state board of election, your interaction with the county clerks are those that are authorized to hold the elections in each of the counties. How do you communicate with them changes? How are you going to affect these changes and make sure that they are implemented if changes come down the pike, such as mail-in, vote by mail procedures?
These kind of changes have been, our operations division communicates directly with the clerks, Brent Davis and his staff. For example, we had a ruling, a court ruling from a federal court in Chicago because the Libertarian and Green parties and some independent candidates had filed a lawsuit because in Illinois, the established party candidates file in November for the primary election, and they did their petition passing back in the fall between September and I think December 5th was their deadline for filing. So that's when Democrats and Republicans did their filing. We have a separate filing period after the primary for new party candidates, which would be Libertarian, Green Party candidates, Conservative, any other party that comes up, and also candidates who are running as independents. Now, that was scheduled to take place June 15th, I think it was mid-June, that they had their filing period was a week, June 15th to the 22nd, I believe. Their petition passing period was scheduled to begin on March 24th. Mm-hmm. So if you were running as an independent candidate or a candidate of a new party, you couldn't begin passing your nominating petitions until March 24th. In addition, new party candidates and independent candidates, because they don't have to go through a primary system and because they don't have a party vetting them, an established party structure that's already proven itself by getting 5% of the gubernatorial vote in a previous gubernatorial election, because they don't have that and they don't go through a primary, their signature requirements are much, much higher. To run for U.S. Senator as an independent candidate or new party candidate, you need 25,000 signatures. The Democrats and Republicans only need 5,000. It's also much higher for all of the legislative races. It's much higher for their congressional races. It's based on a percentage of the vote that was cast in the last gubernatorial election in that specific congressional district or legislative district. So their signature requirements are much higher. So the Libertarians and the Green Party, joined by some independent candidates, filed suit saying, we can't go out and go door to door with a stay-home order in effect and during a pandemic, and we are not going to be able to gather the number of signatures required. So they went to court, they petitioned to have the signature, they wanted it waived. They wanted no signatures. And they wanted the filing period moved from June up to early August. So initially, Judge Rebecca Pallmeyer asked us, our lawyer, and their lawyer to work out an agreement, which we did. It initially went down to they now have a signature. They only have to file 10% of the original signatures. And the filing period was moved from July 31st to August 7th. Now, when that happened, we sent out an email to all the clerks with the new language in it. We revised our election calendar, letting everyone know what has happened. Since then, just last week, we went back after hearing from the clerks, because we got a lot of feedback from the clerks after this decision, saying, listen, that August 7th deadline is really, really late for us, because remember, what happens after candidates file, by statute, there are 5 business days during which any citizen can file an objection to their nomination papers. So if we had a period that went through August 7th, then we had to have 5 business days to allow for objections to the new party and independent candidates. Then you're up into the vicinity of August 12th or so.
And they're probably saying they can't get their ballots printed.
That's exactly right. Most of the objections are adjudicated by us and by local election authorities with fairly swiftly. However, there is all candidates and all objectors have the right to judicial review.
Okay.
So some of these end up in court, and it can take weeks for them to wind through the court system.
Okay.
If you're only starting this in August, and the local election authorities, they begin receiving requests for mail ballots from voters on August 5th, they can start sending them on September 24th. They got to have these ballots printed. That's a big operation. So,
you know,
we'll be notifying we've notified the clerks now that it's been changed and it's now going to run July 13th through July 20th. We do that through email. If they have questions, they call us directly. We're in, you know, pretty regular contact with all.
Let's move on to the vote by mail process.
Sure.
Will it be that everybody will, any registered voter will automatically receive a ballot, or will they have to register to receive a ballot? How is this process going to work, and is it going to be cumbersome for the electorate?
Well, what we know now from this bill, what the bill says is that anyone who voted in the 2018 general election, in the 2019 consolidated election, or in the primary election in 2020 back in March, anyone who did that is going to have an application for a vote by mail ballot automatically mailed to them. So if you voted in any of those elections, you're going to receive an application from your local election authority for a vote by mail ballot.
And when should they receive those?
Those are supposed to be received. They'll be mailed no later than August 1st.
Okay, so then the process, if someone within a week does not receive that, who do they contact to get an application?
Then they would contact their local election authority. There's also part of this bill, I believe, is going to, normally you can't even send an application for a vote by mail ballot until August 5th. I think that in this bill, that you can apply as soon as this bill goes into law, which theoretically would be this week. Okay. So voters will be able to apply for a ballot earlier. I don't think for this audience that would necessarily apply, because this is an informed group where you probably know that on August 5th I can send my application in, or I can get online, or but that's going to be part of the bill as well. But I think the biggest thing as far as vote by mail goes is the fact that there will be an obligation for the local election authorities that anyone who has voted in those 3 elections will be mailed an application.
All right, so I receive that, I return it. How many days after returning my application should I expect to receive a ballot?
That is in the bill, and I think that you are supposed to receive it within 5 days. It's a fairly quick turnover, and again, a lot of this I'm kind of playing by ear because I haven't memorized everything that's in the bill.
Sure.
But it is a fairly quick turnover on those.
So I can either mail that ballot in. Can I drop it off at the polls that day, the day November 3rd, if I decide I want to walk in and see the process?
You're talking about an application?
No.
Just
the actual ballot's been returned to me. I'm supposed to mail it in, but I decide to take it to the polls on November 3rd. Can I drop it off that day?
Well, what you would do in that case, what you would do is you can take it in, turn it in, and then you will cast a separate ballot in person. You at least that's under the current system. You can't take your vote by mail ballot and just drop it off.
that sounds like something someone may not want to do because of protection at the poll for the poll worker and themselves. What I'm trying to get at is, I guess, what is the last date that that could be mailed and counted?
Oh, well, the last day that it can be, they have to be postmarked on election day or before, no later than election day. And they'll have 2 weeks. This is current law too. You have 2 weeks, the clerks have 2 weeks to count ballots that arrive after election day.
So what's going to
So
happen
that
on
doesn't change.
what's going to happen on election night? Are we only going to get a sense of 50%, 60% of the votes cast? Will we not know how Illinois goes until the 15th of November?
This is something that it will really depend on how voters respond to vote by mail. The way it works in Illinois now is that election authorities, as they receive vote by mail ballots, are allowed to process them. They can run them through the tabulator, but they can't count them. So, and that's to make sure that no actual totals get accidentally released to the public, because that could influence voter behavior. They can process those ballots as they come in. What could cause a problem for a voting authority is if they are deluged on election day with thousands and thousands of ballots. This is one of the things that will be worked out. I'm sure that a lot of discussion is being had right now in Springfield. There's a hearing on this bill tomorrow, and we're submitting written testimony for it. But as far as, you know, how much lag will there be for us to know how many votes have cast is really going to depend on how much of the vote by mail gets processed as it comes in, because it can be totaled quickly. Once polls close, they total that very quickly.
But that's not the official vote until
it's not the official vote. And of course, we will know how many mail ballots are outstanding, right, and we will know which counties have the most outstanding vote by mail ballots. So, you know, in this age of data analytics, what always happens is, you know, I was amazed when in the 2018 general election, polls closed, and it seemed like at 7:03, we had the Associated Press declaring Governor Pritzker the winner and Governor Rauner conceding. And that's because there are formulas that they use to determine voter behavior and stuff.
Let me go back. I remember reading that vote-in applications would only be sent to those people who have used vote by mail previously. Has that changed?
No. Now it is vote by mail applications will be sent to anyone. If you voted by mail or if you voted in person, you're going to get an application.
I just want to have that clarification.
Mm-hmm. That's a lot of mailing. That's probably, I'm going to guess that'd be about 5.7 million mailings.
Well, that was my next question.
Mm-hmm.
Is vote by mail going to be less expensive or more expensive for the counties?
Well, it's going to be more expensive, because just having to do this, mailing applications will cost statewide if they were going to mail to all registered voters, it would be about $4.3 million statewide.
And that will be the responsibilities of the counties?
Yes. Okay. However, we are also getting under the CARES Act, which is the federal act for coronavirus response. We have budgeted about $16.8 million that we can, that's designed for mitigation of concerns of all aspects of coronavirus regarding voting. So
that 16.8 is coming to you and you're going to disperse it to the county?
Right.
Okay.
Yeah, we will get authority. There will be spending authority in the budget bill for us to disperse that 16.8 million. And by the way, that is 13.9 million from the feds and a 20% match from the state.
All right. We have a question from Jackie from Wheaton. She's concerned about going into the polling places. Are there going to be as many polling places available in the fall? Are they going to reduce the number, consolidate them? And about the people working the polls, what kind of PPE are they going to have to protect themselves and the voter?
Under the bill that we saw today, there's not going to be a reduction in the number of polling places. In fact,
So
the
no
bill,
county can come and say, we're consolidating polling places.
the counties can do that. The counties can do that.
Would you-
Whether
Are
Now-
you strongly supporting that concept or discouraging the counties from doing that?
that's not something where, this is where, you know, we talked about the role of the State Board of Elections. We don't advocate for things like that. That
Okay.
really is, that comes under the purview of local control of the election. So the counties can do that as they see fit. Now, one thing that will mitigate the problem, a couple of things that will mitigate the problem for the local election authorities on polling places is, number one, this bill, it reduces the number of judges that they're going to have from 5 to 3.
Okay.
Current state law says you got to have 5, reduces that to 3. Another thing that it does, it will allow 16-year-olds. Currently, Illinois law allows high school juniors and seniors with a 3-point GPA, they are eligible to serve as election judges.
Mhm.
Now that's been expanded to 16-year-olds with some basic qualifications. The other thing is, this bill will make November 3rd a state holiday. So schools will be closed. Now, number one, what that will do is it will open up a greater pool of potential election judges, because you'll have a lot of students, for one thing, who will not be in school that day.
Right.
And will be eligible. If they want to go make some extra money, they can do that. Teachers will be off that day. They will be encouraged to be election judges. They can be recruited.
But Matt, what about the situation they had in Michigan where poll workers came down with the virus? Do you think we're going to get a huge onslaught of volunteers coming to and saying, I want to work the polls this year?
That is another question that, you know, and there is a judge recruiting platform that's defined in this bill. And I haven't gotten too much into that, so I don't know exactly what.
All right, so let's get back to how are we going to protect the people working the polls and the people that want to cast ballots on site? What do we expect to see that day?
Well, obviously, we are going to be following, we're going to get our guidance from the Illinois Department of Public Health on specifically what we need to do in polling places. We did this for the March 17th primary as well. And that turned out to be a scramble because it came on so quickly. The crisis really just dropped in a matter of days. This time we've had some time to prepare. You will see election judges, they will have PPE, they'll have masks, there will be the sterilizing wipes for them, for voters, hand sanitizer. All of this is in the new voting bill, although it does defer strongly to the Department of Public Health. And obviously, you know, we're not health officials, so we're going to lean on them. But we are prepared to have all of that. That the PPE is where it will be the biggest difference. That shouldn't be the mad scramble.
We could have long lines like they did in some of the states this year, because will there be added emphasis on wiping each machine down after its use? Can this cause problems, and are we expecting long lines in the fall?
We're hoping to avoid long lines in the fall. Now, getting back to the immediate question on wiping down the machines, touch screens if they're used, you know, voters handle pens. I know that I believe it was on the Lake County Clerk's website. She was encouraging voters for the primary, bring your own pen if you're not comfortable handling. But all of that kind of thing will be heavily, heavily emphasized come November. Now, the other thing, what you saw in Wisconsin is something that, you know, that was a cautionary tale that everyone should have observed. We 100% want to avoid that. We do not want to have those kind of lines, and that just seemed chaotic. And this is one reason why we are, and going back to the schools, Jeff, one more point that gets added in is one problem that was really a crisis in Chicago. They had about 185 polling places cancel on them.
Yes.
And this is at the last minute. This is like through the weekend before the election, they're having polling places drop out. With schools closed, you will have all of those facilities as potential polling places. Now, traditionally, schools have pushed back against the local election authorities because if you set up a polling place in a school, you're bringing strangers into a school. You are disrupting the school day. You're disrupting the flow of things in the building. None of that is going to apply this year if schools are all closed. The good thing about using schools as polling places too is that they are ADA compliant. They're inherently ADA compliant.
Right.
So you don't have problems if you're trying to relocate a polling place with getting a location that can accommodate people with disabilities.
Perfect.
So anyway, I didn't want to leave that out of the discussion, and I'm sure.
Well, let's take a temperature on the legislation that's proposed. Is it going to pass? Is it going to be debated? Are we going to have problems with it? Is it a good piece of legislation, or should the electorate start calling their Congress or their state representatives?
What we saw today, it was what we expected it to be in large part. And so overall, I do think it was we felt like it was a good bill in general. We did have some concerns about a few things in it that will be in our written testimony that will go to the committee tomorrow. There are going to be some concerns from the Secretary of State's office, because one thing that this bill does, which is a very good thing from a voter's standpoint, is there is this required sending of applications to voters. The bill also contains provisions where the Secretary of State's office is supposed to send, there are 2 specific mailers that they send at 2 different points to all voters who have received applications but haven't sent it back in yet. Secretary of State's office is supposed to send them a reminder saying, we are aware, in their specific language, we are aware that you received an application for a vote by mail ballot. We believe that it has not been returned yet and you have not requested a ballot due to COVID-19 concerns. We would encourage that you do this, et cetera, et cetera. That's supposed to happen twice. So they send out one reminder, and then a while later in the election season, they send out another one to people who still haven't sent it. So there's going to be a lot of redundancy in terms of letting voters know, hey, vote by mail is available to you, and we're going to be concerned about COVID-19. So please think about this. It's an option available to you.
Well, let's talk about security. We have some elected officials that have said that vote by mail is fraudulent. It doesn't work. It benefits one party over another. Have we seen any history of that in Illinois?
No, absolutely not. Our vote by mail system, and I'm sure if the clerks on this call could attest to this, and if anybody in this discussion who has ever voted by mail knows that it is a system wherein you put in your application, you receive a specific ballot, barcoded, specific to you. You sign that, bearing your signature that they have on record at the election authority. That ballot goes back, it's received, it's processed by election judges the same as is done in your polling place. That signature, just as if you walk in your polling place, that is your ID. If there is a question about it, if judges believe there is a question about it, there's also the new bill gives enhanced opportunity to resuscitate your not resuscitate. I'm drawing a blank on the proper word now, but to rehabilitate your ballot and to fix it.
A question about one of the things that happens when you vote in person is you get a receipt saying my vote has been cast. The machine spits you out a receipt. Is there a way for the electorate to go online to see if their vote was actually received and processed by the county?
I know that Chicago does this. I believe Cook County does this. I think most of the larger counties in Illinois do this, where you can get online and you can check the status of your mail ballot. I don't know for certain that has been added into this bill, but it's only because I just don't have all the details.
Okay.
But typically, and certainly I think most, if not all, voters in Greater Chicagoland already have that ability.
All right, let's talk about the integrity of the vote. We, meaning we, the citizens of Illinois, were told that in 2016, our election records were hacked by the Russians.
Mm-hmm.
What new initiatives have taken place to avoid that in the future in the state of Illinois?
Well, that happened in July of 2016. We had done some routine maintenance on the statewide voter registration database that we maintain. And after that routine maintenance was done, we basically left a window open. Our system, like any other government system, is under constant pressure. There is always intruders just trying to look for any weakness where
Sure.
they can break in. And they got in. It was a very kind of garden variety type of data intrusion. And our system slowed down to a crawl, and one of our IT people noticed it and very quickly found out that there had been a breach, identified where the breach was, closed that off. We shut down the whole system, notified the Attorney General, who then notified the FBI, who brought in the Department of Homeland Security. Long story short, by October of 2016, the Department of Homeland, we had everything back up and running. We notified 76,000 voters that we believed that enough of their data may have been viewed to constitute a violation of the Illinois Personal Information Privacy Act. Now that's a long way. What I'm really saying is that we think that those 76,000 voters had fragments of their voter registration viewed, like a first name and a zip code, or a unique voter ID and the name of their city and the name of their street. These were not taken as fully intact registration records, but we notified them, gave them a hotline to the Attorney General's office if they noticed anything unusual with their personal information. We were concerned about identity theft. We weren't so much concerned about election fraud, but no one has ever reported anything from that. So from that point on, the Department of Homeland Security began doing security scans on our system. We have since changed everything in the way we handle data in the almost 4 years since then. We are now part of the Multi-State Information Sharing and Analysis Center and the Election Infrastructure Information Sharing and Analysis Center. That is a consortium of government, university, and corporate groups that work to inform each other to stay ahead of potential cyber threats. We've added staff. We've added 4 cybersecurity specialists to our staff. We have 2 people who do nothing but track the cybersecurity of our agency. We have another 2 people. One is located in the State Police State Intelligence, State Terrorism and Intelligence Center. The other one works with the local election authorities through our Cyber Navigator program, which was founded in 2018 using some other federal funds. The the Cyber Navigator program was started to make sure that no local election authority ever goes through what we went through in 2016. We hired 8 cyber navigators. They're assigned to regions around the state. They work one-on-one with the clerks, and they've trained their staffs in, a lot of it is basic cyber hygiene. We have put the transmission that we do every night between the local election authorities and us of all the voter data now flows along the Illinois Century Network, which is a secure data system used by state government. And that's to avoid them ever having to put that information onto the public-facing internet. So really, cybersecurity we partnered in 2018 with the Illinois National Guard. We'll be doing that again. Their cybersecurity unit, because of its connection to the Department of Defense and the intelligence agencies, is probably the strongest for any protection that you could want from any type of cyber intrusion.
So you're telling us everything's locked down in Illinois and the citizens should be prepared.
We never guarantee, we never say 100% guaranteed, but we're doing everything that we possibly can to stay ahead of any hackers. And one thing that I always bring up in these conversations, when we talk about cybersecurity, when we talk about the data breach that happened to our system, when we talk about Russians who are out to hack things, we are talking about voter registration data. We're not talking about the machines that you use at your polling place.
Well, that's my next question.
Tabulate your vote.
I'm going to go to that next, man. What is done? I heard you say in your opening remarks that part of your responsibility is testing the equipment. How do you guarantee for each county that the machines they're using are of utmost, they're impeccable and they're not going to be manipulated in any way, and that they have a zero count going into the election day? How is that process all handled?
Well, first, all those, the tabulators, the touch screens, they're programmed by the local election authorities on computers that are never connected to the internet. So that's how you make sure that no malware of any kind could ever get into those. And then the pre-election testing has to do with making sure that they can identify. I mean, I'm here in Sangamon County. We had close to 200 ballot styles just within our county. And, I can only imagine what the collar counties and Chicago and Cook have, but those tabulators have to be programmed to recognize votes for all these little small local elections. And that's the testing that we do. Yeah. Basically running ballots, thousands of them. The clerks have to do these tests, running thousands of ballots through, making sure that they are accurate and that they're coming back accurate.
Well,
as far as the hacking, yeah, go ahead.
Is the equipment reliable, I guess?
Absolutely, yes, absolutely.
Okay.
And we also then do, after the election, we administer a 5% retabulation statewide, where we randomly select 5% of the precincts that have to run their ballots again, and those have to come out perfectly. And
okay, Kristen asked me to go back and ask you one more question about the vote by mail. Will that be all prepaid postage return? Will anybody have to find stamps to mail their ballot back to the county? That's
worked into this into the bill, that they don't want voters to have to shoulder the burden of it's usually about $1.50 to send your ballot back in.
Right.
So yeah, it would be a kind of a counterintuitive or counterproductive to really push vote by mail and then put that on the voter.
Will the day come
that would suppress the vote,
that we no longer have polling places, that it will be done strictly vote by mail, and that will be our only option? Like going to the polls 10 years ago, that was the only way you could do it on election day.
Well, it's already happening now in Colorado, in Washington State, Oregon. Those states are strictly vote by mail. Oh, and going back to the postage question too, one thing that's also in this bill, there's been a problem in the past where sometimes you'll mail something and it will go through the Postal Service without receiving a postmark. There had been questions before about what does an election authority do with a vote by mail ballot they receive with no postmark after Election Day. And it's been up to them. But this bill says if you receive it with no postmark, you got to count it.
Okay.
So at any rate.
Good, good. The future of elections is going to be dictated by this current corona issue that we have in the United States. Do you find the discussions you're having with the county officials that they want to gravitate to vote by mail and they would like to eliminate the on-site voting?
I think in general, I don't know that I could speak for all of them. They've always advocated, they vote by mail is a convenience to them because it's that much more voting that's done in advance and not that doesn't pile up on Election Day. I'd probably let if the clerks who are on this discussion want to speak up about that, they may have opinions on that. But going to an all vote by mail system, and we've heard this from the former head of the Denver Election Commission, is now head of an organization called votefromhome.org. And she goes around the country promoting vote by mail. And she has even said that, it's not something that you could just impose in a 6-month period. It has to be done incrementally. It has to be done over time. In Colorado, for example, they have drop-off centers. So if people are suspicious about using the mail, they don't have to. By the way, the bill, the current bill would allow for those types of collection boxes in local election authorities.
Right. We're getting close to our ending time, but I have one more question from Ann in Naperville. She wondered about the $16.8 million that had been allocated for safety issues. Where would she be able to see how that allocation was made by your board?
We will, in our monthly board agenda, which you can find on our website. If you go to our website, elections.il.gov, in the upper right-hand corner, there's a tab that says About the Board. And if you hover over that, you will get a drop-down menu that will show you the dates. You can click on for board meetings and agendas. So we give monthly reports on things like voter registration activity by local jurisdictions. There's a monthly Cyber Navigator program report that shows how grant funding that's distributed to the local authorities through that's through our $13.2 million that we got in back in 2018, how that's being used. But that's the best place to check is in our monthly board meeting agendas. You can always, I'm the Freedom of Information Act officer, so you can always email me, or and I'm easy to find on our website or through here. But I suspect that money is going to go fast, and it's going to be it'll be distributed. Typically, these grants get distributed by voting age population by local election authorities. For example, in 2018, that money, half of it was required to go to the Cyber Navigator program. So we put $7 million into that. Then we had what was left was for grant funding. It gets distributed based on the voting age population of a county or election authority. In that case, we took the money, we made sure that no county got less than $10,000 because they're very sparsely populated counties,
Bill,
so would have only gotten a couple $1,000. So
in closing, would you repeat the bill number that the general public should be watching as it moves through the House?
That's SB 1863.
Okay,
And when you go there, it's House Amendment 5 is actually what the bill has become. So if you go to ilga.gov, just search for SB 1863 and then click on House Amendment 5. You can read the whole thing. It actually is, it's not one of those bills that's impossible to understand. It's
great.
you can go through it, you can see the underlined portions are new, and you should be able to understand
Well, Matt,
what
we could
they're
probably
proposing.
talk all night long, but we only had an hour. So I want to thank you for your time and your insight and good discussion this evening. The League of Women Voters at Naperville, in conjunction with the National Council of Jewish Women and the National Association for the Advancement of Colored People, for their programming assistance, and you, the viewer, for your involvement and good questions in this exercise of democracy. The second webinar in the series will take place on June 17th at 7 p.m. Our guest speakers include U.S. Congressman Sean Casten and Bill Foster, and Illinois State Senators Laura Ellman and Julie Morrison. Please take time to reach out to your state representatives and senators to let them know how you feel about the bill. Their phone number, and they can be reached at 217-782-2000, or visit their websites for direct contact information. Finally, we would like you as a member of our organizations. Membership information and applications are available online at each association or organization's website. Again, thank you to Matt. Thank you to everyone for your participation in democracy, and have a good evening.